Hello, and welcome to the brief tutorial for the new content program review documents that you all be getting. And I want to run through what is in this document, what the data represent, and how to write or what components that need to be completed by the content liaisons or content partners, and what the College of Education will do. So this is the generic template. You'll get your report with the name. So for example, English, we've written in up here, and then the report year, it'll say 2015, 2016 because that's the academic year in which the data represent. Now everything in this is new. So all of the old data that you have been working with and writing about for the last few years, we've archived that information, but we decided because all of the assessments are new, we wanted to start fresh. So the first page is a cover page, report author, so your name will go there, whoever's completing the report. And then this says data entered August 2016. I entered the data on August 2016, and then what you will do is put a comma and write analysis completed in whatever date you completed the analysis. And then next year it'll say data entered sometime in 2017, etc., etc. General program information. Now you can copy and paste from your old reports, or you can write new reports. This only needs to be written once, and this is generally required courses. If you want to put a link instead of writing all the required courses, that's fine. But I would do a general overview of what the purpose of the program is, and the coursework that is completed in the program. Down here you have the explanation of assessments. This is already written for you. I've completed that, and Dr. Opstick and I wrote this. And then this next section is new. So one of the things that we're trying to do is narrow the focus of what we're actually looking at in these documents. So there's two major types of alignment that are done for these documents. The first is the assessments that the College of Ed does along with the MTTC as it relates to the INTASC standards. The INTASC standards are the standards required by the state of Michigan that all programs, regardless of content area in undergraduate or initial teacher preparation, must meet. And so what essentially you see here on the left-hand side of the screen is a claim statement, which is basically related to an INTASC standard. And then here is the standard that it's aligned to. These are the assessments and then the elements within those assessments that address the claim statement and these three standards. And you'll see what I mean by there. So the data is captured in this document both by assessment, so the APA, the Assessment Planning and Assessment, and then later on you'll see that we also show how we are meeting or making a case that we're meeting these standards via the claim statements. So there are 4 major claims, and again they are related directly to the INTASC standards, and then we utilize at this time the APA, the LOAP, and student teaching to meet most of these, and then also for claim number 2, which has to do with content and content pedagogy, but mostly content and application of content, we use APA, LOAP, student teaching, and MTTC pass rate. And I've also included GPA in this as well. And then each of the documents have this click here to see data. If you hit Control and then you click on that, it'll actually take you down to the data tables that relate to this claim statement. So it's a live active document. So the next section is content area specific alignment. And so I'll show you more specifically but what that means by pulling up one of the examples. So here, for example, is the English CPR. And so what you'll see we've done is we've taken as the claim statement, we've used the MTTC, what's called the test objectives to kind of guide this through, because really, if we looked at the national standards or the SPAs or the state standards, it all kind of relates to the test objectives, and so we wanted to be focused about really how are we, at least for teacher education, meeting the objectives that are written in the test. Not to teach the test necessarily, because the test objectives are drawn from both the national and the state standards. So I had a conversation with one of our colleagues at MDE, and we thought it would be better to use the test objectives in this case than it would be to use state standards or national standards. So what you'll see in the left-hand column is the claim statement again, and this is basically the sub-area. So this is broken down by sub-area. So the first sub-area for English has something to do with candidate is able to demonstrate knowledge in meaning and communication as it relates to, and then these bullets basically represent all the different components that are part of this sub-area. So what you need to do is then put in the course input. So look at your courses that you offer that are related to this program that are required. So when I say required, meaning all candidates must take it. So if you have a major and a minor, you might need to separate this and say, major students take English 324, 4456, 3278, while minor students take 2000, 250, whatever it might be. And then if there are any additional assessments for this, you'll put this over here. But what you'll also want to do in this section, because there is one guaranteed assessment for this, is write MTTC sub-area 1. So essentially sub-area 1 will assess this. But if we have an internal assessment that you have, that all candidates in either the major, the minor, or both complete, you might want to do that and add that in. So you say, we'll say assessment B. Oops, if I could just spell assessment correctly. Assessment B also addresses this. And then specifically, if it's all of assessment B, you can use that. But if it's only like 3 or 4 things within assessment B, you say 3, 4, and 7. Something along that. So that way it's a reminder to you of what within your program is assessing these things. Now, if there's not a consistent assessment, that's okay. That's something that we're going to be working on with you all in the College of Ed moving forward. So that's an example of what to do here. So we've already input the claim statement and the detail. What you need to do is include the course input. So, English 3775, English 4500, or whatever it might be. And then if there's any, and then you'll have to write MTTC sub-area 1, down here, sub-area 2. If you go down, write MTTC sub-area 2. And then any additional assessments, and that's part of what you need to complete. We're going to keep using English as an example, just so you can see kind of what the data look like in the document. So the next section is program enrollment, and over here, AY means academic year, so whenever you see AY, it means academic year. So here I have 2015-16, total enrollment in English is 11, 5 of those students were in the major, 6 is minor. Now remember, when we say enrollment, these are students that have been admitted into the teacher education program and are majoring in English or minoring in English. So it does not include students who have not yet been admitted into teacher education. So the number may in fact be higher for some of you, but this is folks that have already been admitted to TEP, teacher education program, and are either majoring or minoring in their area. And some of you will have only majors, some will have just minors, some will have both. So that's something to keep a lookout for. But that data is in the document. The next section is data by assessment. So similar to the previous CPRs, we've given you the data by assessment. For the first assessment, and I went in chronological order of when the assessment is completed. The first assessment completed is the Assessment of Planning and Assessment, or also known as the APA. Here's a brief overview of the APA, and then the in-task standards the APA addresses, and then an indication that we have all the data that you've been looking at for the last 6-7 years archived. So the data section, first you have, this is the performance for 15-16 of all candidates or students who completed this assessment. This is how they did. These are their scores in each of the individual areas. Now, one thing that's different is I've given you the data by in-task standards. So sometimes there are like 3 or 4 elements that measure standard 1. And what I've done is aggregated those together, and then for the total score, I've aggregated a larger score for everybody. So 3.336 is 4 or 5 elements related to standard 1 for all 22 students. The next section is specific to your content area. And what I've done here that's a little different is I've given you the data by cohort. So these are all the English students. And for some of you, you have multiple students that completed the assessment. For English, there was only one. And so I gave you the individual scores. And why I did that is because we're dealing with low ends, you might have an average for INTAS Standard 1 of 2.2. And you might say, wow, that's really low, but really you might have had one student who had a 4 and another student who didn't have a very high score. And so that one student was low and the one student was high. So you might want to talk about that when you do your discussion. And so for some of you, there's 2 or 3 candidates, but for most of you, there's only one. But in the future, as our numbers continue to grow and flourish, you may have more students in this. And I wanted to give you as many different avenues to examine the data as possible. So this is already in the report. In the discussion of the APA, this is where you'll kind of write about what you learned about looking at the data. Here's the section for 2015-2016. You write a couple sentences, and then next year there'll be a spot. 2015-16 will stay. There'll be 2016-2017, that'll stay. And then we'll cycle this data in and out probably every 4 years. Similarly to the APA, we have a description of the LOAP, the LOAP, the Learning Outcome Assessment Project. And then the data, as you see here, we had 26 students overall complete this assessment. These are the averages, again, based on the INTAS standards. So for example, INTAS 6, there are 4 elements that represent INTAS 6. So we've aggregated the score per student and then did an average for the cohort. Here you see kind of what I was talking about with the APA. There were 2 students who were majoring in English who completed the LOAP. These are their individual scores, and this is the cohort performance. So the cohort average is here for English students. Remember, this is English. When I say cohort performance, I mean English cohort. And these are their individual performances. So for INTAS Standard 4, one student had a 2.5 while the other student had a 4. So that's just another layer of information for you to look at. I didn't give you the names of the candidates for FERPA reasons because these reports may get out to folks that may not have what's called an educational right to know. And so that way that student information has been redacted. But if you wish to see candidates by name, the advisors can see that and we can give that information if needed. Again, you'll have an opportunity to write a couple sentences about the LOAP data that you have, similar to the APA. Here's a description of the student teaching final. So this is another assessment that we're using, that we've used in the past. Similar to the LOAP and the APA, there's a description. Here you have the all candidate performance. So here's how all 26 candidates performed over the course of 15-16 by standard. And again, the data represent multiple elements, let's say multiple elements for Standard 1 were measured, and then averaged for student, and then those student averages were put together and given an like Standard 1 average. And then down here, again, for English, there were 2 people that completed student teaching. Person 1 had a 3.4 as it related to Standard 1. Person 2 had a 3.6. The cohort average was 3.4. And that's how the data is represented throughout. For the student. Again, 2 to 3 sentences to discuss student teaching, what you learned, what you saw, what you kind of under. Now for the fun stuff. Here we have the MTTC. Again, above is the explanation of the MTTC. And so I give you MTTC data in multiple ways. The first way you're going to look at the MTTC data is by content area, best attempt for the year. So what that means basically is in the academic year 2015 to 2016, you have, in this case, there were 4 folks majoring in English or minoring in English that were related to the English program that took the MTTC. So of those 4 people, 3 people passed, which is a 75% pass rate. The average sub-area score for the folks taking it in that year, again, 2015 to 2016, it's just a snapshot, are 2, 2, 3, and 3. Now, if we look at just those majoring in English, that doesn't read right. Okay, I fixed the typo. So for those majoring in English, there was a 100% pass rate. So 2 people took it, 2 people passed, and there was a 100% pass rate. And these are the sub-area scores for those folks. There were 2 people that took the English test that were minoring in English. 1 person passed of the 2, so there's a 50% pass rate. So it's interesting and good to know the year rates, because that will kind of give you a trend of, am I trending up compared to what my 3-year average was? Am I trending down? What is the possibility here? How are things moving? The next way I give you testing data is by 3-year anyone taking the, in this case, English exam over the last 3 years. So for 3 years snapshot, and I'm taking their first attempt. So this is not best attempt, this is first attempt. And what we have found is that first attempt really relates more to performance in the classroom. So it gives you an idea of whether or not the way that the courses that we have for the program are preparing these students well enough for their first attempt. So in this particular case, there were 16 students that took the English MTTC over the last 3 years. 11 of them passed for a 68.75%. 4 of those folks were majors. All 4 passed the first time with 100%. 12 were minors, and 7 passed, or for 58.33%. And then I give you the sub-area scores for each. Some of you will only have majors, some will just have minors, and so I broke that down for you too. So the first time attempt is important because, again, this kind of gives you a chance to see. So for example, for this one, we might start to say, well, if this is a trend of lower than 2 for the minor, for sub-area 2, well, this might be something we really want to look at because it's pretty significantly different than the majors. The majors are getting a 275, whereas the minors are almost a whole point below that. So that's something to look at and something to analyze. So here I gave you the best attempt, and so I did not provide the sub-area score. So again, this is how students did in your particular area over the last 3 years. So every student that took it for the last 3 years each student is only counted once, and their best attempt. So again, here's English. 16 total students took the English test. 12 passed for an overall pass rate of 75%. Whereas 4 of those were majors. 4 passed 100%. Minors 8 took it with 12 passing, or 12 took it with 8 passing for a 66.7% rate. Best attempt pass rates, I did not provide the sub-area scores because the sub-area scores really focus on, for best attempt or multiple attempts, tend to look at support and advising. They don't really relate necessarily to the classwork, so they're the additional support. So that's why we just give you the pass rates. But if you want the sub-area scores for your best attempts, we can provide those as well. But that's another snapshot for you to see too. In this case, we saw a significant increase between first time and multiple attempts for minors, so that's pretty good. So we see an uptick. And then the last section for MTTC that you see here is how did folks do that completed the program. So these are folks that completed, meaning they student taught in this year. So they did student teaching in academic year 15-16. So you'll see that academic year 15-16 here. Completers means they taught. There were 2 total, and both of them were majors. Both of them passed, so 100%. So there's a 100% pass rate for students that took student teaching on the English test. So that means folks that are getting through the program and getting to student teaching and completing student teaching are passing the test. So that's a good sign. So that's what that means. The next section below that, we look at GPA, and the GPA is content-only GPA. So what I did is I took out all the English courses or all the courses related to the major or minor for your area, and then provided you with that data. So for this particular set, we had, again, remember there were 11 total students enrolled for English. So 5 of them were majors. The average GPA in English was a 3.83. 6 of them were minors. The average GPA for minor was 3.96 in the minor courses. And then 2 people completed the program, and the completer GPA average was 3.7. So that's just kind of to let you know so you can do some comparison and discussion. All of those things here lead to a discussion of the MTTC data, and kind of you can discuss the GPA and kind of your analysis of that. Again, 2 to 3 sentences So remember previously when I talked about content-specific assessments. So some of you have a content-specific assessment, whether it's the senior seminar or whatever it may be. But what we're asking for here is an explanation of that. If you don't have one yet, that's okay. We'll be working with you to develop one. So you'll put that in, probably a paragraph explaining the assessment, what it's addressing. And I would talk again how it relates to the claim statements for the content above. And then the data for the content. You can develop a data table. We can show you how to develop the data table and put that in, so that data is available here. So what you've seen so far is pretty similar to what has happened in the CPRs historically. The next couple sections and the end of the document are new, and so I'll try to explain these briefly, but also give enough detail. So what I've done and what I've provided is I've given you data by claim. And so, for example, for the in-task claims here, so this is claim 1 from the in-task standards. I've written out what the claim is, and then you'll see in the data table, academic year 15-16, and then the APA for this particular content area, the students got a 3. For the LOPE that's related to this section, the students got a 4, and student teaching this section, the students got a 3.5. Now remember, all of these rubrics that we're using are 4-point rubrics, 4 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And so this is pretty good. So this means that the data that we have related to academic year 15-16 to claim 1, the students are proficient because it's above a 3 for all of these. And that's kind of the takeaway. Claim 2, similar thing. But what you'll see here is I've given a section for major and minor, and I'll explain why in a second. So again, academic year 15-16, APA, the major students had a 3. Now there's no data in the minor section because we don't use the APA, the LOAP, and student teaching for the minors. We're not collecting data that way. But you'll see over here there is a content GPA for the minor, and so we did provide data for that. And at some point, there may be an English student who completes the MTTC, and so, or completes student teaching, and they're a completer of the program, and so they will have a pass rate for the MTTC. So if next year 2 students that are student teaching minor in English, and they end up taking the MTTC and both pass, there would be a 100% rate here. And then content GPA for completer, again, they would have their content GPA reflected. So again, the LOAP for this section is 3.25. And then the student teaching for this section is 3.42. Again, strong evidence that Claim 2 is being met by the data here in this section. Section 3, or Claim 3, again, you'll see academic year 15-16, APA 3, LOPE 2.9, which is a little low, but that's pretty consistent. So if you remember, you go back to the LOPE data, the average for the LOPE was the lowest area for anything related to in-task standards 6 through 8 compared to the other sections, and then student teaching 3.34. So this area is a little lower, but again, students are performing relatively well. So you could probably articulate that students are doing well, but maybe this particular claim is an area in which we need to kind of start working on and learning about and talking about, at least for your content area. Now this might elevate for all the content areas, and so that means it's a program, a teacher preparation issue, not just a content area issue. And then claim 4, again, LOAP of 4, and then student teaching 3.47, again, strong. And then here, just a paragraph analysis of the claims. So what did you learn? Were there any claims that were lower? Are there things that we need to do, or does the data suggest that we're performing relatively well? So again, now I've broken out the content claims, and really you'll just see sub 1, in this case, meaning and communication. For some of these, the sub areas are in there. For some of them, it just says sub area 1, so you might want to put those in so you can remember. So what I've done for this section is, again, you'll have the academic year 15-16, major and minor, or in some cases there's not a major and minor, it's just major, and then all. So how did the students perform as it relates to sub area 1 given the assessments that we have? So AY sub area score, that means students taking the MTTC in academic year, their sub area score as it relates to sub 1 for the major was 2.5, for the minor it was 1.5, and the average overall is 2. So that's that's that. And then sub-area 3-year, first attempt. So this means any student that took the English test over the last 3 years, their first attempt for sub-area 1, the folks that were majoring got a 2.75, the folks that were minoring got a 2.18, and the overall was a 2.31. And for those completing the program, a 2.5 if they were majoring, and again, all 2.5 because there were no minor students. So that's essentially what this data table means. Now what you'll see is there's sections here that are blank. Now if you have content-specific assessments that are related to this sub-element, you could put that data in if it is just related to the sub-element. So if it's just related to meaning and communication, again, for English, you can put that in and put the data in by major, by minor, and then by all. And then that's the same for all the sub-areas for your MTTC test. So here again, sub-area 2, literature and understanding, we have data, again, just related to that sub-area. Remember, for here, academic year sub-area score. So anyone that took the test during the academic year 15-16, this is how the major folks performed, this is how the minor folks performed, this is how they all did. For sub-area 3-year, first time attempt, so anyone that took the test over 3 years and their first attempt. And that is true, and this pattern stays consistent. So it's another way to look at the test data and whether or not there may be gaps in preparation and kind of do some comparisons. And again, give you an opportunity to start thinking about, for example, if I was looking at this, are there other measures that we have to say that students are performing okay in literature and understanding outside of MTTC, or genre and craft of language outside of MTTC? How do we know that when they're in the program we're assessing on those things? And then you'll do an analysis of the content area. So given all of the data that you have, MTTC, GPA, the sub-area scores, you can do a one-paragraph analysis of just the content piece. And then the last component for this is, are there any modifications or changes to the program, and the rationale for that. So have you made any changes, or do you propose to make any changes in the next year based on the data? Why are you making those changes? What led you to that path? And then what is your timeline for implementation? Again, just a paragraph. Hopefully I've been able to cover everything that you'll need to know. If you have questions, you can contact me directly. My personal email account, since I'm no longer physically here at Madonna, is tbell3@gmail.com. My cell phone number is 616-560-7292. Good luck. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you, and have a great day.